Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Mattis, and I'm delighted to welcome a very large crowd today for a spectacular event about the miracle that was Bulgaria during World War II. We have three very special guests with us today. We have Dr. Mordechai Paldiel, whom many of you know from our past programs, who was for many years the director of the Department for the Righteous at Yad Vashem in Israel. And he personally oversaw the recognition of two of the Bulgarian heroes who were presented in today's film. We also have the filmmaker with us, PLAMEN PETKOV. He's a Bulgarian American, lives in the Boston area, and we're very fortunate that he was generous in allowing us to screen this film today free of charge, which was very, very kind of him. And we're also graced with the presence of the chemist, Dr. Alice Eichenbaum, who was herself in Bulgaria during World War II, having been born in Vienna and having arrived in Bulgaria as a young child. She spent the war years in Bulgaria, and she'll tell us her personal story. And it's always so touching and moving to have a direct eyewitness account, and we have that with us here today. So first, we're going to turn the floor over to Dr. Paldiel, who will give us kind of the lay of the land of the history that we're talking about. Then we'll hear from our filmmaker, and then we'll hear the personal story of Dr. Alice Eichenbaum. So Mordechai, how are you?
Okay, I'm fine, thank you. Hello, everyone. We're talking about this little country called Bulgaria in the Balkans, what happened was Bulgaria in World War I sided with Germany, and Germany lost, so Bulgaria lost some territories, which were turned over to Romania, to Yugoslavia, to Greece. And the Bulgarians wanted to get these territories back. So when Hitler came to power, Bulgaria decided for political reasons to ally itself to Nazi Germany, because the Germans promised that they were going to restore these lost territories to Bulgaria. So it was a political, not racial union. There were like 50,000 Jews in Bulgaria. And when Bulgaria became an ally of Nazi Germany, the Germans pressured Bulgaria to pass some anti-Semitic laws. And so in 1940-41, Bulgaria passed a law. It was called the Law for the Defense of the Nation. Most people in Bulgaria were unhappy with that, including the church elders and many politicians, because Jews in Bulgaria had lived very peacefully with the Bulgarians. Most Bulgarians, incidentally, are Christians. They belong to the Greek Orthodox Church, but there are also in Bulgarians a small community of Muslims. There are gypsies, there were other nationalities. It was like a mixed population. But based on the law for the defense of the nation, Jews had to wear the yellow star, and there were all kinds of restrictions what Jews could do and what they could not do in the professions that they could be in, and so forth. There has to be mentioned that Bulgaria had somewhat not a full democratic regime. It had a parliament, but it had a king. His name was Boris III. As part of the alliance with Nazi Germany, Bulgaria declared war on the United States and on England, but because they were so far removed that the Bulgarians felt that nothing was going to happen to them. Bulgaria did not go to war against Russia, as the other country that allied itself with Nazi Germany went to war against Russia. But the Bulgarians said we can't fight against the Russians because thanks to the Russians, we obtained our independence from Turkey back in 1878. Anyway, what happened, the Germans had an ambassador by the name of Danica in Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, and they began to pressure the Bulgarian government to hand over its Jews. There were like close to 50,000 Jews, actually 49,000 and so forth. Bulgaria had created a Ministry for Jewish Affairs, and there was a man there by the name of Theodor I'm sorry, Alexander Belev was a very pronounced anti-Semite. So Alexander Belev and the German ambassador signed a secret document in which they would turn over 20,000 Jews to be deported. The calculation of Belev and the Bulgarian government, which at that time did not protest, was that these Jews would be rounded up from the provinces that were restored to Bulgaria, namely from Macedonia and from Thrace. And the Bulgarian indeed rounded up the Jews from these two provinces, but lo and behold, it only amounted to 12,000. And they had signed a document to turn over 20,000. So there were 8,000 missing. And so Belev decided that he was going to pick up the other 8,000 from Bulgaria proper. And that's when a storm broke loose, when Belev tried to arrange for Jews from the cities of Kustendil and Plovdiv to be deported to Poland. Incidentally, the Jews from Macedonia and Thrace went to Treblinka, and most of them were gassed, so there are few survivors. The storm broke. The people that led the storm against the deportation of Jews from Bulgaria proper was, first of all, the head of the Bulgarian church, whose name is Metropolitan Stefan, number one. Here you see Stefan, and here you see the certificate of honor which Yad Vashem honored him. I'll talk about this a little bit later. That is Stefan. As you well know, in the Greek Orthodox Church, church people and bishops and so on, they usually have a beard. And so he was the head of the Bulgarian church and the Holy Synod, that is the head of the organization that heads the church. They protested strongly against the deportation of the Jews. This man was the metropolitan of the city of Plovdiv. And when the Jews were rounded up in Plovdiv, he said that he would place himself on the railway track of the train station and would prevent the Jews from being taken out from Plovdiv. So these were the two leading, we say bishops, they called themselves metropolitan, who took a stand, an official stand against the deportation. This is March 8, March 9, March 10, 1943. On the political front, also, we have a man by the name of Dimitur Peshev. Peshev was the vice speaker of the parliament, and he collected about 49 parliamentarians to pass a resolution which protested to the king and to the government against the deportation of the Jews. What you see on this photo is when in the year 2002, Yad Vashem declared both Stefan and Kirill as righteous among the nations. And this is the ceremony at Yad Vashem in the Garden of the Righteous. What you see here are relatives of these two bishops. They were no longer alive, and they came to the ceremony, and you can see me there. I happen to be the youngest among the group. That's not my fault. But anyway, we honored them, and there was unanimity among the Bulgarian Jews in Israel and among Yad Vashem that these two persons, that is Stefan and Kirill, deserve to be honored for standing up against the government, and they succeeded in the government. Boris, the king, Boris, gave the order to postpone, not to cancel, but to postpone the deportation of the Jews. And one postponement led to another postponement. And finally, nothing happened. The Jews were not deported. Okay, Peshev was forced to resign as the vice speaker of the parliament. Nothing happened to Stefan. Nothing happened to Kirill. The interesting thing and the uniqueness of this story is that Bulgaria is the only country in Europe where the head of the church stood up, protested, and said he would not go along with the deportation of Jews. In fact, he told the king that he would open the churches and the monasteries and the religious institutions and invite the Jews to go into hiding. Finally, what happened, the Russians were on the advance. All of this happened as the tide was turning in favor of the Allies. The Germans were losing the war. It was after the Battle of Stalingrad. And Bulgaria is the only country in Europe where all of the Jews in Bulgaria, close to 49,000, were all saved. Not one Jew from Bulgaria proper, I emphasize proper, Bulgaria proper, not one Jew was turned over to the Germans. What the Bulgarians did, they played politics. They told the Germans, we will force the Jews to perform labor. So what they did, they ordered all the Jews to leave Sofia and go into smaller towns where they were restricted and where they had to live in outside of the main cities. And I'm sure we're going to hear more about this from Dr. Alice Eichenbaum. But that's the most that it went. And some of the men were in labor, so-called labor battalions, where they were helping to build roads and fix fences and so on. So nothing terrible happened to the Jews, and none of the Jews were deported, and none of them died. So Bulgaria is the only country, because of the stand of the head of the church and a leading politician in parliament. We have to mention, some people will bring up the story of what happened to the Jews in Macedonia and in Thrace. Yes, indeed, 12,000 Jews were picked up by the Bulgarians, and they were sent to Treblinka, and most of them died in the gas chambers. So this is a little stain on the Bulgarian record. So there is a big plus there, and there is a small minus. But the important thing about Bulgaria is when people in a country, when civic and religious leaders make a stand, a public stand, it makes a big difference. I also want to mention here that the Bulgarian population, most of them, did not agree with turning over the Jews to the Germans. So there was Bulgarian popular support for the stand of both the Metropolitan Stefan and for Dimitur Peshev. So this is what I have to say for now. And I'm inviting now filmmaker PLAMEN PETKOV, who made a very good film on the Bulgarian story, to take the floor and tell us more about the film that he made. So PLAMEN, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Pauliel. The reasonable question is, who are the people that made this film and why we made it? You know, documentary is teamwork, filming is teamwork, and we were a team of 3 people. I am Bulgarian. My producer is from LA. He's American Bulgarian. And our partner who helped in the research and with the script is a survivor. His name is Vladimir Ignatovsky, and he's film professor. He did not remember what happened during the World War because he was a baby back then, but he knew only the stories in his family, his Jewish family, and what happened. He was curious to figure out what was the real story. That was his motivation, and my motivation was more complex. First, it was, you have watched the film and you know that most of the people, I believe all of the people that we interviewed, they were teenagers during the war. And my grandparents were the same generations. They were teenagers during the war. And this is kind of conversation between me and my grandparents that never occurred. When I was a kid, I spent almost all my summers with them, and I believe that they influenced me more becoming who I am than my parents. But I was a kid, I was not listening when they were telling stories. And later, when I had so many questions, it was already late and I was not able to ask them. And it was kind of a chance to go back and to restore part of the world of my grandparents. But more importantly, I was trying to reveal the truth about what happened, because this was not known. This was secret even in Bulgaria. Most of this information was hidden, and it was hidden because of the communists. You know that at the end of the war, Bulgaria was occupied by the Soviet Russia, and a totalitarian regime was imposed based on the socialist Russian model. And the communists, they hated this story of saving Bulgarian Jews, because all of the Jewish people with Bulgarian passports, they survived the war. And they hated it because the communists had no any involvement in any part. They played no part with this event. And on the contrary, I mean, the people that saved the Bulgarian Jews, they were declared by the communists enemy of the nation, and they were persecuted during the totalitarian regime. All the people that were involved in helping the Bulgarian Jews, they were sentenced, they were killed, they were sent to communist concentration camps, and they didn't have good life if they survived at all the war. But I believe that this is a story that have to be told, because especially nowadays, we need to tell this story and to show a good example from the past with all its complexity again. And but enough about the documents. The documents, by the way, they were hidden in the archives, and we were happy that we found those documents, and we were happy that they were not destroyed. The communists hid them, and they were hidden, but we found them, and we were between the first teams that was granted access to those documents, and we are showing them in the film. But let's set aside the documents, and it's more important to hear from a real survivor, and I'll invite Dr. Eichenbaum to tell her story.
I was born in Vienna, Austria, the only child to a middle-class family. And when I was 6 years old, we moved to Bulgaria. My father had a business there. I learned the language very fast, adjusted to the Bulgarian tradition, to everything, even as a child. I went to a German private school because I know German. Life was very pleasant. Sofia was a modern city, but the moment you left Sofia, things were not that original, but in their way. But the summers we spent in Varna on the Black Sea, there were no hotels. There were just, you rented a room with kitchen privileges. And then we had to go to the mountains of for baths, which was Separeva Banya, that I remember well, had sulfur baths with the whole city smell of hydrogen sulfide. We had to take a bus to a certain city, and then only a horse and buggy. There were no highways. The guy who rented the room with kitchen privileges told my mother, my parents, that he has a villa. When we arrived there, that was the villa. Not only that it was falling apart, the villa, that was a typical Bulgarian villa with chickens and a rooster that woke us up middle of the night. It had no running water, no plumbing, and also no electricity. In spite of everything, we spent many summers there because my parents needed the sulfur bath, and I had a wonderful time as a child. Life was pleasant, as I said, in Sofia, and I loved the people. I adjusted so well. But it was March of 1941 when the German troops marched in. Things changed overnight. First of all, I still was at the German school. I had to finish until June. The swastika was flying over the school, and every day we had to sing the Horst Wessel lied. The German teachers came in already with the swastika, Heil Hitler. From March to the end of the school, I don't think any German teacher ever called on me or ever took me to the blackboard. The Bulgarian teachers were more understanding, but still they made very remarked, don't shop at a Jew, don't associate with a Jew. Half of the class also told me that their parents told them, they don't want to associate with me because I am Jewish. Also, the rules were all Jews had to report to the police station. We had to hand over, if we had a bicycle car who had a radio, our nice radio had to go. No Jews could own business. Doctors couldn't work in hospitals. That's the way it started slowly. I had to finish school, and I could not get into a public school. There was a quota already for Jewish kids. So I went to a French Catholic school. I was so happy there. Unfortunately, I didn't stay too long. Half of the class was Jewish, which was good for me. And the nuns, or the sisters, were very, very kind and understanding. Things were starting more difficult. We had curfew. After 8 o'clock, no Jew was supposed to be outside. No Jewish woman could go shopping before 10 o'clock. We were issued coupons for food, but we were still, no gentle people could work for Jews anymore. So my mother lost, of course, the help for the house. Things were going slow, but they never know the certainty. In November, after they established the Wannsee conference in Germany, where they established Treblinka and Auschwitz, that was November of 1942, we were issued the Yellow Star. And it was known as the smallest, as you can see, you can hardly see it, the Yellow Star that we had to wear all the time. It was just a little button. It wasn't as big as the one in the West with Jude or Juif on top. On every Jewish home, we had to put the sign, Evreisko Жилище, it means Jewish home. At the same time, also, entrance to Jews is forbidden. When on all the restaurants, on the movie, all the important buildings, even the main street, which the main street was Tsarov Svoboditelj, we couldn't go there. Well, we adjusted to this too. And we got less and less food and coupons, but somehow you always could buy it. And February and March, Hitler sent Filmmaker to Bulgaria. He needed, like the doctor said there, that he needed the 20,000 Jews, and I'm not going to repeat it because this was the story. The Jews were all rounded up in Macedonia, and they went through cattle cars through Sofia. And I remember we collected clothes, mostly clothing, and we gave it to the police. We were not allowed to go to the train station to give it to them. In May, we got the orders. The police came to us and said, we have to leave. We were all 25,000 Jews of Bulgaria had to be dispersed in small cities. Why they did it, it was a political movement, supposedly, because it would be easier from there to send us to the West. We never know what the West is, but we know the West is no good, no good. We got the orders. The first transport left May 26. We were the second one, on May 27. We only could take one suitcase and some other belongings with us. We went to the train station, and there were a lot, I remember a lot of people with the Yellow Star. It was the train from Sofia to Burgas, where everybody were assigned somewhere where they had to get off. In general, in all the things, I never saw the German police, the Gestapo. It was always the Bulgarian police that gave the orders and followed through to us. That's the only time I saw the Gestapo at the train station, who directed the traffic. And we were so lucky we got on the train without checking our IDs because we had German passports with the big J on it, big J on it. We went to Karnovat. It was a small town, 60 kilometers from the Turkish border. It had still a Turkish bath and a Turkish minaret that chimed 3 times a day. First, they didn't know what to do with us because we were the first transport to arrive. It was a small Jewish community with houses where they placed us in there. We were not really like a ghetto, but we were not fenced in, but we knew the boundaries where we could go. We were very limited. There were 2 brothers that had houses and we had a combined backyard. And this was the young people that we were all at the two houses. We were placed in we had a room with three families in it, 3 families, and no running water and no plumbing. Again, we had curfew. We only had 2 hours a day to go out. My mother went to go and see if there was anything left shopping because the farmers by 10 o'clock or 11 were already gone. My job was to go to the well to bring buckets of water because there was no running water. We had coupons and we got less and less food. There were as you know, Bulgaria had a big amount of gypsies. They got more than us. If we got 1 kilo sugar, they got 2 kilos sugar. So my mother would sell some of our clothing for some extra food. There was very limited, and trust me, there were many days we were hungry. My mother came down with malaria, quite sick. No doctor was allowed to go to the Jewish people. I came down with whooping cough, again, very sick, and no doctors. Things were terrible. We didn't know from one time to another. The police always came, gave us new orders. One time we played, we didn't know what to do anymore. There was nothing to do, the young people. And we played the accordion. They came and told us they would arrest us if we had fun again. But time marched on. It was end of August of 1944, or beginning of September, when the police came, and again, we were scared, and said we should take down the sign of Jewish home, Evreiski Zhilište, and we don't have to wear the yellow star anymore, and we have no curfew. We're free. You know that for 2 days, we didn't move because we were afraid that it was something, a trap to take us. But on September 9th, 1944, the Russian army, the Soviet, moved into Bulgaria and we were liberated. We were so happy to see them. Trust me, my mother even kissed one of them because we didn't know what the future will bring from one day to another. I just want to say something about my husband, just to compare our lives. My husband was born in Poland, Lodz, and was for 4 years in the Lodz ghetto. End of August, beginning of September, when I was liberated, he was sent to Auschwitz with his brother and sister. He managed still to get a number of Auschwitz and was not liberated outside of Mauthausen by 1945, or April of 1945, almost 7 to 8 months after me, alone, without a brother or a sister. So you see how lucky I was to be liberated that early. We went back to Sofia. Sofia was bombed by the British. We lost our house and all the belonging and had to start all over again. Now the communists took over. and they closed, of course, all the foreign schools. I went to a public school, had to be tutored in math and chemistry, but somehow I managed to graduate in 1946 from PETKOV Gymnasium, which means the 5th girls' gymnasium. I left for Austria that fall to study chemistry, organic chemistry. But I came back to Bulgaria in 1947, not realizing that's my last time being in Bulgaria. I missed Bulgaria, and I missed my parents. Little did I know, because as a student, you had to join a communist brigade, and you had to work for 4 weeks on a plan that they send you. If they send you to a kolkhoz, you were lucky. You were lucky. So you picked only apples or cherries. No, I was sent where they were building a highway, and there were big, heavy stones that the men with a sledgehammer would split them up, and we, the women, had to take them in wheelbarrows and post them far away. We didn't work that many hours, but it was hard labor. Somehow they needed somebody who spoke German, because it was a German group and they needed an interpreter. With this, they moved me to headquarters. As you can see, I had to wear an uniform, and here was a big shot of the Communist Party. I never came back because I had a Bulgarian passport at this time, and I didn't think that the Bulgarians will ever let me out. And I still think back of Bulgaria with very fond memories. I grew up there, and somehow I felt I'll grow old there, but it didn't work that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. So now I'd like to invite the panelists to have a conversation among yourselves before we open it up to the public.
So I would like to say something, Alice, thank you very much for your story. We have to clarify a few things. The German army passed through Bulgaria when it attacked Greece and Yugoslavia. But Bulgaria,
That's right.
Bulgaria was not conquered by the Germans. It was a fully...
Oh, no, they were not. They were not. They were allies. They were allies.
They were allies?
No.
Well, Hungary was also an ally, but the Germans took over Hungary. But they did not...
But they came in. I still see them when they were coming in.
But Bulgaria was a fully independent, sovereign country.
Independent, but the German army came in.
So
they were there.
They were there.
I remember that.
But whatever happened to the Jews was done by the Bulgarians, not by the Germans, right?
No, I said it. I never saw a German police. No. Never saw the Gestapo, and never. That's the only time I saw them at the train station. But it was always the Bulgarian police. Always.
Bulgarian police.
Never, nothing with the Germans. No. Okay. But the Germans were there. The German police was there. I mean, the German army was there.
The German army
I was still strict told by my parents not to speak German to them, because then they'll come up that I'm Jewish, and we didn't want any trouble.
The other thing is, I want to say, of course, the record of Bulgaria is not 100% kosher. It's 80% kosher, okay? But you have to admit, the Bulgarians did not create ghettos like in Poland. They did not wait, let me finish. They did not create internment camps like the French Vichy did for Jews. But what they did, in order to avoid turning over the Jews to the Germans, as the Germans insisted, and Hitler insisted, Hitler called Boris to a conference, and he asked Boris, the king, why don't you turn over the Jews? And Boris had to say, we'll do it later. In the meantime, we are taking the Jews out from the main cities into smaller towns. Now, you may have your own thinking, Alice, but I think that I'll give you the example from Poland. In Poland, the Germans concentrated the Jews in the big cities. They closed down the small Jewish communities because it was easier from the big cities to deport them to the gas chambers, like from the Warsaw Ghetto and from the other ghettos. In Bulgaria, they dispersed the Jews to many, many smaller towns. It would have been easier for the Bulgarians to have all the Jews in Sofia and to put them all on one train and send them off. So the purpose was to find excuses not to deport the Jews, not to turn them over to the Germans. So that you have to give credit to the Bulgarian. They were not so happy. No, it's true that the Jews were restricted. There was a law. There was an anti-Semitic law. If you are an ally of Nazi Germany, you have to have some anti-Semitic laws. But let me ask you, Alice, were you ever physically battered by a policeman? Were you beaten? Were any Jews beaten? Did any Jews die in Bulgaria because they were manhandled? I don't think so. So sure, it was not a happy occasion. It was not a picnic. But all in all, the Jews survived. That's the only thing. It's the only country.
I know, I said it, you know. In my final remarks, I want to say something.
And that was the purpose. That was
My final remarks. I have some final remarks.
You would like to add your voice to the discussion.
I think Alice struggled more than most of the Jews because she was in Sofia and she had German citizenship as well, but she was in Sofia. Only the Jews from Sofia were forced to leave the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Jews from all other cities and villages, they left in their homes. They were not touched, and it was not good but it prevented them from extradition as well, because when they were spread, the Jews from Sofia, there were 25,000 in Sofia. It is the biggest Jewish community in Bulgaria back then. When they were spread to small villages and towns in the country, now nobody will be able to collect them and to deport them. This was the secret idea, to make them struggle, but to protect them at the same time. And the Bulgaria was ally of the Nazis, but they signed the treaty with the Nazi on March 1st. And when they signed, the German troops, the Wehrmacht, was already in Bulgaria. They were crossing the Danube River anyway, the Germans. And the Wehrmacht had two plans to cross Bulgaria. They were on their way to Greece because there was a British Army Corps in Greece, and they had to stop the Brits there before turning to Russia. And they had two plans, two military plans for crossing Bulgaria. One was, if Bulgaria was ally, they were ready to cross Bulgaria for 24 hours. And the second, if Bulgaria is an enemy, Wehrmacht was ready to cross Bulgaria for 48 hours. We were not able to stop them at all. We didn't have the military capacity or whatever. And the government decided to sign the treaty and became an ally.
So I'm seeing that there are a lot of questions accumulating in the Q&A. We'll get to those in a minute. I do encourage people to continue adding their questions. We'll get to as many as we possibly can. Right now, I want to briefly tell you about our upcoming programs. So this Wednesday, it's in fact not our program, but I want to mention to you that I personally will be speaking about the hero that we honor, Aristides de Souza Mendes. There is the French and Francophone Studies Association that's having its annual meeting, and they're devoting a panel to speaking about him. So that will be this Wednesday. It is a free program. All the talks, there'll be 4 talks, all in English. For those of you who are season ticket holders, sign up for that program is not automatic because it's not our program. So if you're interested, you will have to sign up yourselves. And the email that you receive after today's program will have information about the Wednesday panel. But our next program of the Souza Mendes Foundation is next Sunday. And for that program, the subject is a hero whose name was Freddie Hirsch. We will be showing a film called Dear Freddie. So right now I would like for Dr. Paldial to explain briefly about the importance of Freddie Hirsch. Then we're going to see a little excerpt from the film and then go to your questions. So Dr. Paldial.
So for next week, for next Sunday, we have a story which is so extraordinary and so bizarre that we have in Auschwitz, the worst and most horrific place on earth. We have a family camp. We have a section in Auschwitz where parents and children were allowed to be together. They were not selected. They didn't have to wear clothes, prisoner clothes. Their hairs, then they didn't have to cut off their hairs. They could live together as families, and the children could have their own programs. They could have education. They could have music. Right inside Birkenau. As you know, when children came to Birkenau, usually they were sent straight to the gas chambers. But here we have a family camp of thousands of parents and children. There were two such groups of 5,000 each. In each group, there were 1,000 children. So what is going on there? What are the Nazis, what are the SS doing? Freddie Hirsch was in charge of the children in Auschwitz. Again, the children in Auschwitz. He was born in Germany. He was very athletic. He almost made it to the 1936 Olympics, but he couldn't make it because he was Jewish. And then he went to Prague, again involved in sports activities for the Jewish communities. From Prague, he went to Theresienstadt, like most Prague Jews, and Theresienstadt, which was a mix of a ghetto and a concentration camp. You may have heard of that name. The Germans made a propaganda film about Theresienstadt. Over there, he was also in charge of children, athletic programs. He did something which the Nazis were displeased, and he was sent to Auschwitz. And in Auschwitz, that's where he made a mark, where he, for at least 6 months, he took charge of the children and made them feel and that they were special and that they could lead a normal life under the circumstances in Auschwitz. Unfortunately, at the end, the Nazis decided, the Nazi plan was they were doing that family camp, not because they wanted to save these Jews, but they were concerned that the Red Cross would want to come and visit Auschwitz. So they wanted to show them a section of Auschwitz where family life was okay. All right. When the Red Cross declined to come to Auschwitz, then these people were sent to the gas chambers. And Freddie Hirsch, at the end, committed suicide, and he died, and that was in March of 1944. So it's a fascinating story about Freddie Hirsch, and even more fascinating, and as I said, completely out of our mind, is the family camp that existed in Auschwitz. It started in September 43 and lasted until July 1944. That's going to be on next Sunday's program, which you are all invited to show up and attend.
So now we're going to have a little preview, a sneak preview of the film.
הוא היה מורה ספורט שלי, אני שיחקתי כדורגל, שיחקתי טניס, הייתי מאוד פעיל, והוא גילה אליי, אצלי, את הכושר האתלטי. הוא היה צריך להיות אחת מהמשתתפים באולימפיאדה בברלין בתור מתאמן. היות שהוא יהודי, לא קיבלו אותו, הנאצים הוציאו אותו.
היה להם לכולם הזדמנות לברוח, לצאת. פרדי היה לו גם אישור לצאת. ואז הוא כבר עבד עם ילדים יתומים. היו ילדים שכבר ההורים, לא יודעת אם בגלל הנאציס או בגלל איזו סיבה אחרת, הם היו לבד. אז הוא אמר שעד שהילד האחרון לא יצא משם, הוא לא יצא, ואם הוא יצא זה יהיה לפלסטינה, לא למקום אחר. זהו, הוא עבר לצ'כיה, בדיוק כשאבא שלי וכולם נסעו לבוליביה, ושם הם מצאו מקלט בזמן המלחמה. אבא התחתן והקשר עם פרדי עבד. הם לא ידעו מה קורה איתו.
כשהוא הגיע מגרמניה, העבודה הראשונה שלו היה חינוך גופני בברנו, במסגרת ארגון מכבי. הבנים הריצו אותו. ממש, הוא היה מאוד קפדן, ומשמעת.
יהיה כפוץ. הוא היה גרמני, לא ידע מילה אחת שקט. ובמשך הזמן הוא קיבל שם.
הוא תמיד היה מסודר, היו לו מגפיים, הייתה לו משרוקית, השיער תמיד מסורק, תמיד זקוף.
I saw him in our Zionist organization, and he looked like a toothpaste advertisement. He had this shiny black, slick black hair, a very handsome face, and an incredible grin with white teeth. I felt totally connected to Techelet Lavan. We had a place called The Home, where we had classes in Hebrew. I belonged to a kvutza, name was Simcha, and Simcha is, I think, joy or happiness. Suddenly there was a group of people I belonged to.
So I do hope that you'll all sign up for that program next Sunday. So again, after today's program, you'll get an email with information about it. Some of our programs are free, such as today's program. Next week, we are asking for donations. We're suggesting the amount of high or $18, but if you're comfortable giving more, giving less, whatever's comfortable for you is fine with us. So now let's get to your questions. There are a few questions about a figure who appears in the film but hasn't yet been discussed, and that's Liliana Panizza. So would somebody like to speak about her and why she has not been honored by Yad Vashem?
Lili Panizza, she played a very important role because she was personally related with a Jewish family. She was a babysitter in this family, and she kind of connected very a strong personal connection. And because she was working for Alexander Belev, that was mentioned earlier, and he was the Commissar of the Jewish Affair, he was the biggest anti-Semite in Bulgaria, the person that organized the deportation of the Jews from Thrace and Macedonia and tried to deport the Bulgarian Jews as well. And she was the one that leaked the information, what is prepared and what is going to happen. And she brought this information to the Jewish family she was very connected to, and they spread information quickly. And once this was not secret anymore, the people had time to react and to protect and stop the deportation. And it was very timely because the deportation of those close to 9,000 people were stopped literally 4 hours before they were loaded on the trains.
Well, but there's a controversy about her. She has not been honored by Yad Vashem. So can you speak about that?
Well, she was the private secretary of Alexander Belev. And Alexander Belev was a commissioner of Jewish affairs. And he was the man who was to put into, he was the man who had to carry out the anti-Semitic law. And he was a known anti-Semite. At the end of the war, either he killed himself or somebody killed him. And she was his private secretary. There is also, it is not known how deep her affections were towards Alexander Belev. Some claim that she was in love with him, although she disagreed with his policies. So, but she was a whistleblower. She gave out news secretly to Jewish people what was going to happen, what was in store for them, so they could take some measures to avoid it, okay? At the end of the war, so a lot of Jewish people are thankful to her for spilling out the information which she was not allowed to give out. At the end of the war, the communists, the new regime, put her on trial. They tortured her and so on. I think she was condemned to death, and then she was commuted, and she was released, and then she died immediately. Incidentally, the communist regime put on trial many people in the political system that tried to help Jews. Even Peshev himself, who was honored as a righteous, he was placed on trial because he was the vice speaker of that parliament, which was anti-communist, and he was sentenced to death, but then his sentence was commuted to imprisonment and his life was spared. So Liliana was not honored by Yad Vashem because of the controversy about her role as being the private secretary of Alexander Belev, the anti-Semitic minister in charge of implementing the anti-Jewish laws.
So there's a question about the two heroes that you mentioned at the top of the program, Metropolitan Stefan and Metropolitan Kirill. So either PLAMEN or Mordechai, one of you maybe could answer, was either one of them punished by the Soviets?
Of course they are. They were. All the religions were forbidden in the communist Bulgaria. All the religions. Exar Stefan, he was the head of the church, and in 1948, the communists forced him to leave his position in the church, and he died the same year. And Exar and Patriarch Kirill, he became a patriarch later. He became a patriarch, and he tried to save the church as much as he could, but practicing of religion, any religion but communism, was forbidden in totalitarian Bulgaria.
Okay, and then there's a question about the synagogues of Bulgaria. Were they damaged in any way during the war, or are they standing? And if so, where?
The synagogue in Sofia is standing, and it's really beautiful. There were some other, but this is the biggest one. There was a really beautiful synagogue in Vidin, but needs restoration because nobody took care for many, many years. In 1948, almost the entire Jewish minority left Bulgaria, and only about 4,000 Jews left in Bulgaria. And they are the owners of those synagogues, and it was not easy for them to take care of so many synagogues with no resources.
Okay.
They're the owners of the synagogues, the Jewish.
Dr. Eichenbaum, somebody wants to know how it is that you have kept all of these photos and that the photos survived. How is that possible?
Which ones? Which ones?
These early photos from your early life.
Oh, the early life, I don't have too many, but we lost a lot. I don't, but I want you to mention about the synagogue. We had two big synagogues in Sofia. They were both on Exel Yosef, I remember. One was the Ashkenazi and the one was the Sephardi. The Ashkenazi doesn't exist anymore. The last time I was there for a few years ago, but they rebuilt beautiful the Sephardic. It's now the second biggest after Holland, after Amsterdam, but they don't have too many Jews now. There's hardly anybody.
We only have a few moments left, so perhaps, Dr. Eichenbaum, you can give us your final thoughts and then moving to our filmmaker and ending.
Well,
Natalia.
I must admit that 49,125, and I'm one of them that survived. I know, looking back many times, even I love Bulgaria. I don't remember the bad things. I only remember the good things of Bulgaria. I was happy there. And I really must thank the Bulgarian people to a certain point. They really protected us. There was a different relationship between the Bulgarian people in Bulgaria than between Austria or Vienna with the Gentiles. The Bulgarian Jews were not rich, Maybe they had a villa outside of Sofia with running water, but I assure you they didn't have no Rembrandt or no Van Gogh or no Klimt in their houses. And thank you also, I thank also from history, the many of the ministers, like Peshev, that really spoke out. The church was very protective. There were rumors that the head rabbi of the Sephardic synagogue was supposed to be arrested. So the church took him in to protect him. And then history tells, we don't know, King Boris to a certain point and didn't give out the Jews. And the Germans also wanted the Bulgarian soldiers to fight against the Russian. So he didn't give them out. What happened to him after the 2 weeks he was in Berchta's garden? Nobody knows. I don't think historians ever came out. I remember even, we were already in Karnovat, of course, when that happened. And no music was supposed to play for weeks. And we had to put even some black bows outside. It was big, you know. And also what I remember from history, the prince was only six years old, Prince Simeon. So they put on 3 regents. And one of them was the brother, Kirill, of Boris, the other 2. And they were very pro-Germany. So we were afraid a little bit there, you know. And I remember also when the communists took over, it was really interesting. The schools, all the pictures of the king and the queen were gone. And there was Lenin and Marx and everybody. And we all had to wear little red flags with the hammer and sickle on it. So things changed for me. I went to grow up under a kingdom, lived through a dictator, then the communism, and now I'm here in a democratic country.
Thank God. Now, PLAMEN, what would you like to say to our audience?
It's a great story, and it's a really, it's a really great story that the Bulgarian Jews survived the war, and most of them after that they moved to Israel and start building Israel. And I believe those stories have to be told in their complexity. We need those stories, especially in times like today, and there are lessons that we have to learn from those stories and have to remember.
Dr. Paldiel, I think you have an image you want to show us.
Yes, well, I want to say something about, again, I want to point out Stefan, the head of the church. Stefan went to see the king. First, he talked to him over the phone, and then he went to see Boris. And I want to read to you what Stefan said to the king of Bulgaria. Something which there is nothing similar in other countries. This is Stefan speaking to the king. Boris, my son, one hears lately of many things done to our Jewish brothers. This is unworthy of you and of the Bulgarian people. Things have come to my knowledge which I would rather not believe. They are a disgrace and shame to you and to the Bulgarian people. Boris, let it not be too late. Pull yourself together, my son. Boris, you forget yourself. You know that for me there are no secrets under the sun. Give the matter serious thought and uproot this demonic influence from your heart. And then Boris reads from the New Testament, from the Sermon of the Mount. Do not persecute so that you may not be persecuted. With what measure you mete out, it shall be measured on you again. End quote. Boris, from heaven, God keeps watch over your actions. End quote. So it was unheard for a church prelate to address a king and ruler in such harsh tones. So what's the message? When a country's political and religious leaders take a strong moral stand, it can make a huge difference between acts of goodness or evil. In no other country, even among the allies, was there something similar to Bulgaria, no political leader like Peshev, no head of church like Stefan, both who stood up and challenged the regime's decision to turn over the country's Jews to the Germans. As a result, the whole population of over 49,000 Jews in Bulgaria proper were saved. One can learn a lot from this moral challenge, and hopefully Bulgaria's example will inspire political and religious leaders in other countries to act likewise. Now, may we have a look at the Bulgarian stamp? So this is a stamp that Bulgaria issued after Yad Vashem recognized these two people, Stefan on the left and Peshev on the right. We at Yad Vashem, we honored Stefan in 2002. Peshev was already honored years earlier. And in 2003, Bulgaria issued this stamp in honor of these two persons. Thank you.
So another fabulous hour has flown by. I'd like to thank our fascinating speakers, and I apologize to the audience that we didn't get to many of your questions. We will be forwarding the entire contents of the chat box to our speakers, so if they wish to respond individually, that will be up to them. But I do want to thank all of you. It's such a wonderful big crowd today. I hope to see you all next week for the last installment of this first season of our 2021 program. Then we will be taking a break until after Passover and resuming again in mid-April. So hope to see you all next week. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.